So now let's begin with working both in the Army and for the Central Intelligence Agency.
You're going to see some saucer crafts that have been gathered in the U.S., in New Mexico, and we have other crafts that have been gathered from around the world, he said.
And how far are you from the closest craft?
Oh, I would say probably 30 feet. And the first two crafts we seen looked almost identical, and they were smaller crafts. Colonel Jim had mentioned that they were Vril crafts. We had asked him, what in the world is Vril? We never heard of Vril, and he said it's a foreign saucer built in Germany in the 20s and 30s. Then he says the next three crafts are alien crafts. I asked him about what is the propulsion system on these three crafts, and he said that they are anti-magnetic gravitational engines on two of them, and one was a antimatter containment field inside of an antimatter type propulsion, and was much more complicated than the other ones. The other ones were very simple in comparison. From what I gathered, they sort of thought that the antimatter propulsion was, to them, seemed like it would be an older type compared to the setup on the newer ones. It was an older type of a vehicle.
It was more complicated.
Yes,
You were shown the 16-millimeter black and white dissection film of the six-fingered humanoids 2 weeks before.
Yes.
Did any of you say, we've seen the 16-millimeter film of the six-fingered humanoids, which one of these discs belongs to them?
Yes, we did. All he would say is that they told me, since I've been here, that these three were from New Mexico, but I don't know which craft is which. All I know is that all three of them were supposedly from New Mexico. And the other four are foreign. They were picked up in foreign areas.
And you're going to continue with him when we come back, Linda, are you not?
Yes, and where we are right now is inside of Area 51, Nellis Air Force Base. And he is with the Colonel Jim and his boss from CIA and three other CIA colleagues. And they are on a tour to look at craft, and they didn't know about the fact that they were going to meet this being, and their confusion was that in their CIA work, they had seen an autopsy on a six-fingered, six-toed being. And now what is in front of them at Area 51 is a very different type. The truth is that extraterrestrial biological entities are interacting with this planet, and secret agencies of our government know that.
And welcome back to Coast. We're with Linda Moulton Howe. Go ahead, Linda. Let's pick up.
Yeah, we found out that our phone recordings were being tapped. And so I went down to Florida with the idea that if I could meet and talk with him face to face without being tapped on the phone, that what he had to say was so historically important, his details were so rich, that I first taped the 16 hours with him. And when I left, a surprising thing happened. Here we thought that we were doing all of this secretly, and he and his wife went to the supermarket. I'd only been gone an hour or two from being at his house doing the interviews for 3 days. And two men were leaning up against their car, and as they walked up, the two men motioned to Cooper. He walked toward them, and they said, "We are here to tell you that if you want to see your son and have the grandchildren you would like, you will never speak to Linda Moulton Howe again."
Wow.
That was the first round. A few days later, at his diabetes doctor, the men were in front of the doctor's door, and they said the same words to him again. When I got home to Philadelphia, I found the voicemail from Cooper telling me that he was so sorry that he so much wanted to work with me to get out this very important history, but that he couldn't risk his son and that he could not go forward with the videotape that we were going to do. This is about his work for the Central Intelligence Agency. His cover was teaching cryptography at a Army base in the southeast that he still would like to be kept, the name out of the public. This is his research into extraterrestrials working for the CIA is such a vital historic truth behind the United States government's policy of denial since World War II about ETs, UFOs, and a lie that humans are alone in this universe.
In addition to the 7 discs, did you ever see any of this?
I saw drawings of the control panels for the 6-fingered panels.
And where did you see the drawings?
And I saw those on, I think it was in the Roswell file itself. I saw a picture similar to this with the drawings on it, and they had several pages, and they described how they actually worked with the fingertip controls. The controls were tied to fibers. At first they could not identify how they worked at all, and they saw little fibers running off to the end that plugged in, and they didn't know it was fiber optics, of course, because fiber optics wasn't invented. They called it fiber filament.
Fiber filament.
Yeah.
And that's what they had to look at under a microscope?
Yeah, at least one of the hand panels they checked and found out this whole thing was tied into the electrical current area or the fiber optic area, so it carried throughout the ship. And they said, too, in that same rundown, that there was so much fiber filament in this craft that at night the craft actually had a slight glow to it from all the fiber optics that was in it.
What part would glow?
That was the interior. They only talked about the interior. And that even the walls and everything was wired in this Roswell craft as far as electrical current.
When the beings would have their hands placed into those panels, what would happen?
Didn't know exactly how they worked as far as which hand did what, but they knew that they had guided all the controls as far as more current going into the anti-gravitational or the electromagnetic device, and in turn it would feed into the anti-gravitational system. But they didn't know which finger did what, but they knew all the fingers were apparently entirely guided by hands.
When their hands were placed into the panels, and the panels were fiber optically connected to everything, didn't you make a comment about how the entire craft became a capacitor?
On this printout that I saw in the file on these, they did mention that on this one, on this Roswell craft, they didn't find a distinct power plant area. Like the entire craft was the electric magnetic field and anti-gravitational field. And that even the aliens that flew it, like their uniforms were tied right into the electronic field, and maybe the aliens themselves. And they had pictures, too, of the headbands that the aliens wore, and that they could, by turning their heads, they could guide the craft in that manner also.
With the headbands?
Yeah, with the headbands.
And that was in that report?
Yeah.
Because Corso talked about these strange headbands that Trudeau had in the file cabinet.
Yeah. It mentioned that pilots hooked up to mild electrical current tried these headbands, but all they got out of it was violent headaches, because our brain would be different from their brain, and whatever was the suggestive part of our brain for the craft going one way or the other was entirely different from the aliens. So in other words, it was completely useless to us. It'd have to be all readjusted.
Did you ever see anything like this?
Yes, and in the paperwork that I saw, they listed it as alien hieroglyphics. Before I left military service, I did see something listed that the hieroglyphics were actually ancient Greek. One little small paragraph on the last page, it did say some letters compared to early Greek. So it did have it on there, and that was in the early 50s at least, that particular file.
And if these six-fingered humanoids were involved with the inspiration of Greek civilization and prior...
Yeah, Greeks got their alphabet from one of these aliens.
When you saw the drawings in the file, that was at the CIA, not at the Area 51 of the panels.
Yes,
Okay. Do you remember anything else that Colonel Jim said about the craft?
He just kept walking, and we stopped, and then he would motion us to come ahead, and we'd try to ask a couple of questions. In other words, he was in a hurry to get us out of there. We were just supposed to get a glimpse of these things, to get an idea if we saw pictures, what type of craft it might be, whether it be alien, whether it be German, I suppose. He wanted to walk us through there just as fast as possible.
What did he say to get you to move to the next stage?
Well, when we were up toward the last one, we were just ready to head out, and he says, we've got to see one of the aliens, and right now we have the alien in the interview room, and we would like to have you come. And of course, we were just dumbfounded because at that time we had no idea that we were going to see an alien.
Were you thinking six-fingered at that moment when he said...
Yes, I think all of us were. And then when we saw the being that we did with the large eyes and the peaked face and the large head, we were kind of shocked how the alien actually looked compared to what we thought we were going to have. Yes, The top of the head, I think, was quite a bit larger, blooming up, you know. On the six-fingered aliens, they show like muscle build. But on this one, he was very thin.
Anything about the lower part of the face?
The little mouth, the chin, and the nose holes. And he had some areas where it had little outcroppings on his skin sticking up that looked like a bee sting, that you'd get a bee sting and it would puff up around his neck and down his arms. His skin was coarse. Canvasy would be a good description for it. He had a T-shirt on, a T-shirt with straps, like a child's T-shirt, I would imagine. I don't know why they would have dressed him up in something. And Colonel Jim says that you can talk to him, but you only have 10 minutes. I don't know what the big rush was. It's like they had to take this alien somewhere. Colonel Jim said that this alien doesn't speak to you, that he speaks to you telepathically.
So Anonymous is inside of an area in Area 51 where they knew that they were going to see craft, but they did not know that they were going to be shown an extraterrestrial biological entity. And this Colonel Jim has now taken them to a sort of a room. It has a one-way mirror in it. And Colonel Jim, Anonymous's CIA boss, and the three other CIA agents go into the room where the being is introduced to as a gray is sitting behind a desk. And Anonymous had grown up in a strict religious way, and he told his boss that he did not want to be in the room with that being and asked to be in a separate room. And he is now, Anonymous is now standing on the other side of a one-way mirror. He can see the being and he can see the CIA people, but allegedly the being can't see him, but the assumption probably is awareness there because everything is telepathic, which is where this picks up. His boss asked Anonymous to give him questions, and this begins with what Anonymous said to his boss to ask this gray alien.
And then I talked to my boss, and I said, ask the being if he's a demon, and ask him where he came from, how old he is. And
from the time that you got from Area 51 Wasn't there some discussion between your boss and Colonel Jim about why is this being here and what?
Yes, and I asked how long has he been here, where is he going, what are you doing with him, besides like debriefing him or whatever. And he said he's been here for some time. I stayed out. I was in a room sitting about 20 feet away from the one-way mirror, I guess you would.
You could see through, and
I could see the being. I could see, he wasn't real tall, probably 5 foot. After my boss went in, I could still see him sitting behind this table. When you would come up with a question in your mind, you didn't have to say the question. He could read your mind, and he would answer it before you would speak the question. And my boss said, first of all, are you a demon? He said no. And the other ones asked him, like, where you're from, and he gave them some kind of a star area or galaxy area that nobody ever heard of with a number or something like that. Then he got up and started pacing back and forth with his hands behind his back. And, of course, we couldn't see his feet because that was behind the desk. When Anthony asked him the first questions about demons, Anthony could hear the answer, but the other two men could not hear the answer. They did not hear the answer at all telepathically. Only the person that was asking the question heard the answer. So the guys were repeating the questions and answers like back and forth.
Did anybody say, why don't you just telepath to all our heads so we hear it at the same time?
Yes, they did. And he just said something like, this is the way we communicate, like one-on-one.
You're just watching, and you could see the point where the gray being got up and seemed to be pacing and walking. Did you ask your boss, why was the being getting up?
Yes, I did, but he said, you really know how to push their buttons. I think Anthony just thought that all aliens had 6 fingers at that time. I think he thought that if you see one alien, you see them all or something. Oh, and this Jim, on the way out, I said, is this the only alien that you have? Jim did mention just before he went in, some of the aliens have different features. There are a number of different kinds, but this happens to be a gray. He did say before he went in that there are different types of aliens. This is a different type of alien, different appearance from the autopsy film that you would have seen.
Did anybody say, well, what is the relationship between these different aliens?
He did say that they all seem to use the same terminology, that they come to be a help, not a hindrance, and are not coming here to destroy the country.
You were talking about how you asked your boss and the colleagues what the telepathic communication sounded like. Could you go over that again?
I asked my boss and the others what the voice sounded like. From the description that they gave, that it sounded more maybe electronic than actually a human voice. Neutral, not high, not low.
How did the session come to a close?
Well, Colonel Jim was in there at the very beginning of the session. Then he came out through the door into the room where I was and kind of looked up in the air and rolled his eyes like same old questions.
Now it's August of 1958,
yes.
And you've been exposed to a live being. You've been exposed to the 7 discs. You've seen the 16-millimeter black and white film of the 6-fingered humanoids. You've been in the CIA library and you've seen files concerning Roswell, the retrieval of at least 3 kinds of discs, the implication that there are discs in Argentina and Antarctica. What kind of things now start coming into the office?
We used to see some of these alien crafts come right in over the radar that we had on ships from outer space right down into the Argentine area. And we saw crafts come right into the Antarctica area from outer space with radar. We worked together with the British, and they would send us radar tapes of the craft flying at terrific speeds and coming down into the Antarctica area. They couldn't follow it all the way down because of the curvature of the Earth, but they knew it was headed for that general area. Some of them caught coming in that were going like 30,000 miles an hour. Huge, fast speeds.
And what would be the discussions when you would get together as a group about what was the intelligence that's in these machines, what is it doing, and what does it want?
Well, Anthony was always trying to get more information, like from headquarters, if they had found out information as far as these beings. And sometime we'd have a huge amount of sightings, like military sightings, something that we knew were completely legitimate. All of a sudden, we'd have dozens in some areas of crafts, which really kind of blew our mind, because all of a sudden they would appear on military screens and just fly right over them at huge speeds. Those we knew were authentic because they came right from military equipment.
Did anybody say these are hostile?
No. We did have some reports of several people or one person or something like that was abducted.
Military or civilian?
Civilian. In the countryside in Greece or in Italy or something like that.
That there was a known sighting of a disc and a person?
Person that had disappeared and was walking up to look at the craft and disappeared, or that they were taken aboard the craft and kind of examined, and they found themselves laying on the ground away from the area where the craft had sat down.
So these are reports that you were reading in 58, 59, 60.
Yeah.
Teams that would go and interview these people?
Yeah, we had the cattle mutilations going back at that time, and they were investigated locally. They weren't really ours because they weren't out of the U.S., but they gave us those to picture the cattle carcasses to be able to look for that in some foreign sites, as far as if we found cattle mutilations.
Did the reports that came to your office specify that the unusual animal deaths were directly linked to extraterrestrial craft or discs?
Yes, because they had saucer crafts spotted in the area and seen by the ranchers. They could find these carcasses. Each one was tied to a saucer sighting.
And when you got those reports, animal mutilations, human abductions, you'd get together for a meeting and say, what?
Well, yeah, so why are they doing this? Why are they taking certain parts of these cattle and animals and other animals? I mentioned in the report that they had mutilations of small animals also, other than just cows. Anthony came up with a twist. He said they would usually always take the sex organs from the cattle. And they said maybe they're using these because we had seen the alien autopsy and it said they were neither male or female. Maybe they're trying to use some of this material to either try to manufacture a being that it could reproduce or something like that. That's kind of like the main gist of the animal mutilation. And the abducted, they were always probed or examined, this type of thing. We had one woman had an implant in his neck, which I think that was the Puerto Rican site. The agent there had a doctor remove this thing from her neck and found out it was some kind of a chip of some kind, because she said that they had implanted something in her, but she had a miscarriage right away. It was just a tiny little fetus, very young, and they couldn't see any difference between if it was like a regular human fetus or if it could have been like an alien fetus. But apparently that must be part of their experimentation. And we gathered that they put the implant in her neck, not too far from the spinal column, and we gathered that that was like a homing device where they would be able to find this particular woman again, wherever she may be.
So you were dealing with abductions, implants, animal mutilations, craft, some German, some extraterrestrial, six-fingered humanoids, and gray beings, all in that short period of time between 1958 and 60.
Yes,
Now, that is quite a statement.
Sounds believable.
Well, and to realize that we're talking about that period he was working in this base between 56 and 60 and got recruited into the CIA around 57. So he was there in that last part of the 50s, and that there are these many subjects that are being covered. And when I first talked to him, my very first recorded interview was May 2nd, 1998. I was in Philadelphia then, and he was in Florida, and we were talking for the first time on the phone. And he asked me to call him Cooper. So I'm going to reference him as Cooper. So on the phone on May 2nd, 1998, 15 years ago, Cooper told me that he had worked in this southeastern Army base that was still very sensitive, and that he was teaching cryptography, and that the base was involved in these sensitive matters, and that's why he requested that I not use the name and why they have been pauses or blanked out in the audio, and that soon after, around 57, he was recruited by his boss that he calls Anthony at this Army base, but to work for the CIA, and that their job would be to analyze UFOs and ET matters. And this is a very important piece. In a real and highly classified Project Blue Book, same name, but this one was conducted through Fort Belvoir, Virginia, and the CIA. And he explained to me that muddying the waters is classic counterintelligence style, and in that style, the CIA created in 1952 the phony UFO debunking project that they also called Project Blue Book. And it was designed to be used only for media and public consumption. That's why they gave it also the name Project Blue Book. That would help the real one that he was working in hide behind basically a phony one presented to the public, and therefore it would always be discredited. And that way the CIA could use this PR, Project Blue Book, to condition the media and the public to think that there was nothing to UFOs and ETs while they were secretly and seriously investigating extraterrestrial biological entities on Earth. And the CIA sort of, quote unquote, ended the public Project Blue Book through the Air Force as the front in 1969, while the CIA and other intelligence agencies have continued since then and are doing so today to monitor and investigate extraterrestrial interactions with this planet. And this sort of upside-down, bass-backwards world of counterintelligence misinformation is what I have long called the Hall of Mirrors with a quicksand floor, deliberately designed to divert public and media attention from the truth while the government persists in its policies of lies and denials that were officially put in place in World War II. And when I was talking with Cooper back in 1998, he felt, like so many people that I know who have been in military or intelligence, that the whole human family has a right to know this truth. Cooper traveled with his boss to Washington, D.C., to Langley, CIA headquarters, and to the White House for a meeting in the Oval Office with Vice President Richard Nixon, and that he was involved in preparing documents and photographs and film in which there would be a discussion with Richard M. Nixon, and in one meeting, the president then, Dwight D. Eisenhower, was also there. And that Cooper's Anonymous had the distinct impression that Dwight D. Eisenhower knew a great deal, Richard M. Nixon wanted to know a great deal, and that at that time, what he and the CIA were bringing to bear was trying to go out into not only the world, but throughout the United States to find the best cases, best physical evidence, forensics, and gather all of this to a number of underground installations where they were studied then, and as far as I know, they're being studied today. And the big question is, why can't our government get past the policy of denial about such a huge truth? and Peter Gersten and Citizens Against UFO Secrecy wanted to continue investigating. And so that's why I went to Kirtland Air Force Base in the meeting set up by Peter Gersten. And it was in that meeting where I thought I would be there for 10 minutes, get witness names, addresses, and phone numbers so that we could follow up. And instead, I filed the Freedom of Information Act against the CIA, NSA, NRO, DIA, all of them, trying to get UFO documents. And that was a case that went all the way to the Supreme Court. Pretty soon, Gersten was able to build up quite a case, and that was the in camera where the attorneys for all of the intelligence agencies were saying that the documents were rightfully classified. They were able to look at documents that were largely blacked out, and from there, it kept going completely in an unexpected way when he pulled this document out of the desk drawer and said, my superiors have asked me to show this to you. You can read it and you can ask questions, but you cannot take notes, and I want you to sit there. And he pointed to a chair that was in the middle of the room, which I had been videotaped the entire time in this meeting from my reaction. And some of the sentences in the paper that he showed me included, these extraterrestrial biological entities manipulated DNA in already evolving primates to create Homo sapien. All questions and mysteries about the evolution of Homo sapien on this planet have been answered, and this project is closed. And those are the kind of sentences that when you see them for the first time, at least this is the way it affected me, I just kept reading them over and over, trying to comprehend the implications of this several-page document that was essentially saying that our government knew that humans were concocted by extraterrestrials, that extraterrestrials had been terraforming and interacting with Earth life. And there was a paragraph that I really never talked much about before, but I certainly have had it reinforced by other people that I have met since that meeting with Richard Doty, who have told me that our government has proof that at least 3 different types of extraterrestrial biological entities have terraformed and interacted with this planet for more than 270 million years. That means that humans are the latest made life form, and that we don't understand at all what is going on in the cosmos, this planet, and that that kind of document is what set me off on many more complex paths that I have written about in my first book, An Alien Harvest. And I then learned a few years later from someone that around 77, 78, an exchange between a security guard at Ellsworth Air Force Base who drew his gun on a blonde-haired being, as I understood it, outside of a craft that had set down in an area of Ellsworth Air Force Base, and the security guard drew his gun, and instantly there was a beam, I think it was green light, sort of like laser light, hit the gun in his hand, evaporated the gun, leaving only surface warmth on his hand. This was the story that Peter Gersten was interested in following up what he had done in Freedom of Information Act. He wanted to find out who knew the most about this case, and he and Citizens Against UFO Secrecy would go to Ellsworth, and he said, Linda, if I set this meeting up with you, with this AFOSI agent, you can go, you can find out, and then we can it's win-win, because I want to do the documentary on hard-breaking information concerning extraterrestrials.
Strange stuff. Let's go to Tom, truck driving in Ohio now. Tom, go ahead. Thank you.
Back in 74, me and a friend of mine saw an unusual-looking light off the coast of Hollywood, Florida. Must have been around almost midnight. We were shooting pool, came out and saw something over the ocean. And at first, it looked like a blimp. And I was trying to figure out why a blimp was out there that time of night. And it got closer to land, wasn't making any noise or anything. I thought maybe it was a Japanese blimp or something because it was right in some kind of cliffs. Couldn't understand it. A couple of Navy jets came in, started circling this thing, and then it started speeding up, made no sound, and just left like in a line. It didn't zigzag or anything. It just zipped right out of there and left those jets behind. Not a sound.
Sir, did you say it was writing RITING glyphs?
Yes, exactly.
Meaning that it looked like it was moving in the sky and leaving a glowing pattern of symbols?
No, it was more like it actually looked like a blimp. Maybe the Fuji tire blimp, right, the Japanese symbols. But when we got a better look at it, the symbols weren't Japanese. There was some kind of hieroglyphs of some kind.
Okay, hieroglyphs have been described in many instances, and if I understand, then you're seeing something that is a blimp shape, and it has some kind of hieroglyphs, like written on it, carved on it.
That's amazing, Linda.
If that man is listening, would you please email me at earthfiles@earthfiles.com so that maybe you and I can talk about exactly what the glyphs look like? I would appreciate that. earthfiles@earthfiles.com. Thanks, George.
Okay, Linda, we're going to come back and take final phone calls with you in just a moment. Linda, let's take a few more calls here. Boy, this hour's going by fast.
It really does.
My gosh. Let's go to Tim in Indianapolis. Timothy, you're up with us.
Hey, it's an honor to speak with you guys, and I'd like to thank you for all the hard work you guys do. My question real quick is, with the Earth having a magnetic pole shift and these sounds that we're hearing, would it be like we're in a big MRI machine? And, I mean, that would cause disruption. And, I mean, it seems logical. I'm not a rocket scientist or anything. And then is there any update on the Baltic Sea, the object there?
Okay.
Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, and thank you. Thank you for appreciating our work. First of all, pole shift. There is not an active, instantaneous pole shift. We could go for another 500 years, and the poles would still stay where they are, the North Pole and the South Pole. But there are indications that there are changes, as I've been talking about. There's definitely changes in the core. They may or may not accelerate or have impact on what has been a natural variation of pole changes on this planet so many times. That's just a known fact. This Earth will change polarity. When that happens, what exactly will occur for birds and animals that depend on magnetic fields, we don't know. But right now, the poles have not shifted. So that's really clear to keep that in mind. On the Baltic Sea image, I've corresponded not too long ago with the ex-Explorer team, and they are frustrated again about needing more funding to do more refined and sophisticated research in that very murky Baltic Sea water. And they're hoping this spring that they may be able to do something that will truly push this research a lot further. That's the way Dennis and Peters told me.
Yakima, Washington we go. Jeremy's with us, west of the Rockies. Jeremy, good morning.
Hi, George, Linda. Very grateful to be on the line.
Good to have you with us.
My main question is, I've seen a lot of things here in Yakima, orbs, stuff like that, and where I live, I could see the Yakima military base. Well, anyways, I see a lot of flares, was what I would describe them as, and what they do is they blink in, blink out, and then they're really bright, and they kind of move around, but they're always above the hill right there. And I was wondering if you've seen anything about that.
Lights, moving lights, are such a part of this, we'll call it strange phenomena I have been in Hessdalen, Norway, with scientists studying lights that move around and pop around up in the treeless, high, all rock area above Hessdalen. I personally have seen orange lights moving over crops in England and Wiltshire at night. Others have seen them moving in the day, flickering and fluttering like a mirror. There are all kinds of hypotheses about 3-inch or up to 12-inch diameter glowing spheres related directly to extraterrestrial technology, defined this way. They may be programmed plasmas, and that the programmed plasma can interact with our environment and be programmed, just like we would do computers, only it would be plasma, and that it has the ability to download and upload information, monitor, do tasks, and something that humans are not capable of doing. And that has been part of the phenomena. We'll call it high strangeness phenomena, some of it related to ETs and discs, for such a long time that I'm reminded of a book about very strange events that have been documented around the world. And one of them was in, I believe it was Tibet, and it was an American couple, and they were on a path, and they saw a light, exactly what you're asking about. It was small. It was about baseball size, glowing, sort of gold. And to their amazement, the light transformed right before their eyes into a full-bodied male human who had on some kind of cloak, and the being or whatever kept walking on the path in front of them. And they didn't run. I would wanted to run and say, I just saw you turn out of a light. Where did you come from? Who are you? But they only have written this up as something that they saw firsthand. And frankly, I think they're probably describing exactly what they saw. But is it dimensional, a dimensional transport? Is it exactly like some of the sci-fi stories that if we only understood how to bend space-time, that theoretically is possible, that you could move point to point through the cosmos, and if you move point to point, you might see exactly that, a light that is a circle that opens up and then somebody comes out of it.
Let's go to Bob in Dayton, Ohio on the wild card line. Bob, go ahead.
Hi, George and Linda. I just have an observation. Since this unfortunate disappearance of this plane, I found a map on the internet of the globe, and I noticed that all around the world there are around 10 areas which are similar in description to the Bermuda Triangle. My question is, I think, frankly, it's a little bit unusual that I haven't heard in all of the time of the discussions of everyone about the theories of what happened to this flight, that no one has mentioned the possibility that maybe this flight was caught up in one of these areas, such as usually is reported about up in Alaska or the Bermuda Triangle.
Well, actually, we just had a report on last week about that.
Oh, did you?
A huge story. They call it electronic fog, and that it engulfed this plane and it crashed, they say.
Where does anomalous magnetic, let's say magnetic field collapses on the planet, where does that leave off and the UFO phenomena starts or the other way around? Because Philip J. Corso said that it was very important to understand that on our planet that there were magnetic field lines that would collapse and that extraterrestrial intelligences could use the naturally collapsing magnetic field lines to enter and exit our planet.
Just like portals. Linda, thanks so much.